The prison of iron. Ilara stood before the mirror in her dimly lit chamber, her reflection staring back at her with a mix of longing and quiet defiance. The room was cold, its walls made of gleaming silver metal, much like the unyielding iron pants that had been locked onto her body since birth. These pants were not ordinary. They were alien technology, forged by her father, Lord Sinar, the ruler of Cryonax. The iron shimmered faintly, etched with strange glowing glyphs, and they were as much a prison as they were a mystery. She ran her hand over the cold surface of the iron, feeling the faint hum beneath her fingertips. The pants were more than a physical barrier. They felt alive, almost as if they were monitoring her every move. For 18 years, they had been her constant companion, her unwanted guard. Ilara's father had always claimed the pants were for her protection, but she couldn't understand what he was protecting her from. She was no ordinary Cryonaxian, and she knew it. Her pale skin and bright, human-like eyes set her apart from the others. The whispers in the palace halls reminded her daily of her difference, her strangeness. "She's half human," they would murmur. "A danger to us all." Lord Sinar's strict rules had kept Ilara isolated for as long as she could remember. She was forbidden to leave the palace grounds, forbidden to speak to strangers, and most of all, forbidden to question the iron pants. But Ilara's curiosity was stronger than her fear. One day, as she sat by the tall window overlooking the vast, shimmering forests of Cryonax, she heard the distant roar of an approaching spacecraft. Her heart raced. Very few ships ever came to Cryonax. Her father kept their world isolated from outsiders. Yet here was the unmistakable sound of something breaking through the atmosphere, heading straight for the palace. Moments later, the ground shook as the ship crash-landed in the nearby clearing. From her window, Ilara saw the wreckage, a small battered spacecraft, smoking and sparking. And then she saw him, a figure stumbling out of the wreckage, human in appearance, with disheveled hair and a look of desperation in his eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. A human. She had read about humans in the ancient texts stored in the palace library. They were resourceful, clever, and unpredictable. Ilara's father had always warned her that humans were dangerous, but as she watched this one struggle to his feet, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The palace guards quickly surrounded the human, their weapons drawn. Ilara pressed her face against the cold glass, trying to see what would happen next. The human raised his hands in surrender, shouting words in a language she barely understood. The guards hesitated, then dragged him toward the palace gates. Ilara's curiosity burned brighter than ever. She had to see him, had to know why he was here. More importantly, she needed to know if the whispers were true. Could a human really unlock the iron pants? Later that evening, when the palace was quiet, Ilara slipped out of her chambers. She moved silently through the grand hallways, her bare feet making no sound against the cold floors. The glyphs on her iron pants glowed faintly in the darkness, as if sensing her growing excitement. She found the human in the interrogation chamber, his hands bound and his face smudged with dirt. He looked tired but determined, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape. From the shadows, Ilara whispered, "Who are you?" The human flinched, his gaze darting toward her. "Who's there?" he replied, his voice low and cautious. Ilara hesitated for a moment before stepping into the dim light. The human's eyes widened as he took in her appearance, the alien features softened by her human-like eyes. "My name is Ilara," she said, her voice steady. "Why are you here? How did you get past the planetary defenses?" The human chuckled bitterly. "I didn't mean to come here. My ship malfunctioned. I crashed. And now..." He glanced at his restraints. "I'm a prisoner." Ilara tilted her head, studying him. "What's your name?" "Jack," he said. "Jack Mercer." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Jack Mercer. Have you ever heard of the legend of the human key?" Jack frowned, confusion flashing across his face. "Human key? What are you talking about?" Ilara's heart raced as she explained, her words tumbling out in a mix of excitement and desperation. "The iron pants I wear, they've been locked onto me since I was born. They say only a human can unlock them. I need to know if it's true. I need your help." Jack stared at her, his confusion deepening. "Iron pants. That's strange. But why would anyone lock you up like that?" Before Ilara could answer, the chamber door creaked open, and the glow of the glyphs on her iron pants flared brighter. Both Ilara and Jack froze as heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. "Hide," Jack hissed. Ilara backed into the shadows just as the door swung open, revealing her father, Lord Sinar, his piercing eyes scanning the room. "I hope you're comfortable, human," Kynar said coldly, his voice filled with authority. "Because you're not leaving this palace alive." As Stinar's words hung in the air, Ilara clenched her fists, determination surging through her. She wasn't going to let this human die, not when he might be her only chance at freedom. And for the first time in her life, she felt the iron pants hum with something new. Hope. The human key. The cold air in the interrogation chamber was thick with tension. Jack Mercer, a human engineer who had crash-landed on the alien planet Cryonax, sat in the center of the room, his hands bound to the armrests of a sleek metallic chair. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The walls were covered with alien symbols glowing faintly, their patterns pulsating like a heartbeat. It was unnerving. In front of him stood Lord Sinar, towering and imperious, his deep silver skin catching the dim light. His piercing, unblinking eyes were fixed on Jack. To Sinar, humans were weak and reckless creatures, unworthy of the secrets Cryonax protected. "Why did the iron react to you?" Kynar's voice was cold and commanding. Jack furrowed his brow. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice steady despite the fear curling in his chest. Sinar stepped closer, the sharp edge of his cloak brushing against the floor. "Don't lie to me, human. When you entered the palace, the iron binding my daughter began to hum. That has never happened before." Jack blinked, confusion mixing with unease. "Your daughter? What does this have to do with me?" Sinar's lips curled in disdain. "Everything. If you are what I suspect, then you are both our salvation and our greatest threat." The door behind them creaked open softly, but Sinar didn't turn. Jack glanced toward the sound and caught a fleeting glimpse of Ilara in the shadows, her figure barely visible. She was watching, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Sinar continued, unaware of her presence. "The iron is no ordinary material. It was created by the ancients, combining human and cryonaxian technology. It was designed to suppress something far more dangerous than you can imagine. And yet, it responded to you." Jack shook his head, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm an engineer, not some ancient key. You've got the wrong guy." Sinar's hand slammed down on the table, making Jack flinch. "Do not insult my intelligence. The glyphs on the iron are human designs. Your kind created this curse, and now you must help undo it, or die trying." In the shadows, Ilara's heart pounded. She could feel the iron pants vibrating faintly, a reaction that seemed to intensify every time Jack spoke. She couldn't wait any longer. Before she could think twice, she stepped into the light. "Father, stop." Sinar whirled around, his expression darkening. "Ilara, what are you doing here?" "I need to speak to him," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "If he's the key, then he's my only chance at freedom." Sinar's gaze softened momentarily, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "You don't understand what you're asking. If the iron is removed, you cooled." "I don't care." Ilara interrupted, her voice rising. "I've spent my entire life locked in this prison you call protection. I deserve to know the truth. And he might be the only one who can help me." Jack watched the exchange, his curiosity piqued. "What's this all about? What exactly are these iron pants?" Ilara turned to him, her expression a mixture of hope and desperation. They're more than just a lock. They're a cage. My father says they're protecting me from myself, but I think they're hiding something even he doesn't understand. Jack frowned. And you think I can unlock them? She nodded. The legends say only a human can. Sinar's face hardened. Legends are not facts. The risks are too great. I will not allow it. Ilara stepped closer to Jack, ignoring her father's protests. Please, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. If there's even a chance, I have to try. Jack sighed, his mind spinning with questions. He didn't know why he was here or why this alien girl believed he held the answers. But something about her struck a chord deep within him. Her determination, her defiance. It reminded him of himself. All right, he said finally. I'll help you, but I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Ilara's face lit up with gratitude. But Sinar stepped between them, his towering figure casting a shadow over Jack. You will do no such thing, he growled. I will not gamble with my daughter's life. Maybe you should, Jack shot back, surprising himself with his boldness. Because it sounds like you've already lost her trust, and if she's willing to take this risk, maybe you should listen. Sinar's eyes narrowed, but he didn't reply. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the glyphs. Finally, Sinar turned to Ilara, his expression unreadable. If you insist on this path, then you must do it alone. But don't come to me when it all falls apart. Ilara nodded, her resolve unwavering. I won't. As Kenar left the room, his cloak billowing behind him, Ilara turned back to Jack. Thank you, she said softly. Jack shrugged, trying to mask his nervousness. Don't thank me yet. I still have no idea what I'm doing. Ilara smiled faintly. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Together. As the glyphs on her iron pants glowed brighter, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far bigger than himself. Something ancient, dangerous, and inescapable. And yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt compelled to see it through. Secrets of the Iron. The hidden chamber was nothing like anything Jack Mercer had ever seen. Its walls pulsed with an eerie glow, a mix of alien and human design. The glyphs carved into the smooth metallic surfaces shimmered faintly, as if alive, reacting to Ilara's presence. The air was heavy, electric, and filled with an overwhelming sense of ancient mystery. Jack stood in awe, running his hands over the strange symbols. He had been an engineer back on Earth, skilled at deciphering complex systems, but this was something else entirely. He glanced at Ilara, who stood beside him, her iron pants humming softly as if resonating with the room itself. This place, Jack began, his voice echoing slightly, is a masterpiece of hybrid technology. These glyphs, they're human designs, no doubt about it. But the materials, the way they're alive, that's cryomaxion. Ilara's eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and fear. Do you think this is where the iron pants were made? Jack hesitated, scanning the chamber. Not just made. I think this room holds the answer to why you're wearing them in the first place. Before either of them could say more, the heavy sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ilara froze, her heart racing. It's my father, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack frowned, his mind racing. If he finds us here, he'll stop us, she finished, her hands clenched into fists. We don't have much time. Can you figure out what these glyphs mean? Jack nodded, his gaze narrowing as he studied the glowing patterns. These symbols, they're part of a code. I've seen something similar in ancient Earth archives. If I can decipher them, I might be able to figure out how to unlock your pants. But it's not just a lock. It's more like a seal. Ilara tilted her head, her fear momentarily replaced by curiosity. A seal. What are they sealing away? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Jack's fingers traced the lines of the glyphs, his mind working furiously. These markings suggest containment, protection, and danger. Whoever built this didn't just want to keep something in. They wanted to keep the galaxy safe from it. Ilara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Are you saying I'm the danger? Jack glanced at her, his expression softening. I don't think you are. But maybe there's something inside you, something even your father doesn't fully understand. Before she could respond, a section of the wall slid open with a low hiss. Jack and Ilara stepped back instinctively as a holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. It was an image of a woman, human, with striking features and eyes that mirrored Ilara's. Mother, Ilara breathed, her voice breaking. The hologram began to speak, its voice clear and calm. Ilara, if you're seeing this, then the iron seal has begun to weaken. It means you're coming of age, and with it, the powers within you are awakening. Jack stared at the hologram, stunned. Your mother was human. Ilara nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She died when I was a baby. I've never heard her voice before. The hologram continued, unperturbed by their emotions. The iron pants were created to protect you and the galaxy. Your hybrid nature gives you access to a power that neither humans nor cryonaxians can control alone. But with great power comes great risk. The iron seal suppresses your abilities until you're ready to control them. If it's removed prematurely, the consequences could be catastrophic. Ilara took a step closer to the hologram, her voice shaking. But how do I know when I'm ready? How do I unlock it safely? The hologram's image flickered, as if struggling to stay active. There is only one way to unlock the seal without causing harm. You must stabilize the energy within you. The stabilizer is hidden within this chamber, encoded within the glyphs. But beware, once the seal is broken, others will come for you. They will want to use your power for their own gain. The hologram faded, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. Jack exhaled sharply, his mind racing. So the iron pants aren't just a lock. They're holding back your abilities. And if we mess this up, the galaxy could be in danger, Ilara finished, her voice barely above a whisper. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Ilara turned to Jack, her expression fierce. We don't have time. You need to find the stabilizer. Jack nodded, his focus sharpening. He scanned the glyphs, his hands moving quickly over the glowing patterns. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A series of symbols that formed a sequence, hidden in plain sight. This is it, he said, pointing to the glyphs. The stabilizer is embedded in the floor panel. We just need to. The chamber door burst open, and Lord Sinar stormed in, his face a mask of fury. What have you done? He roared, his eyes blazing as he took in the scene. Ilara stepped forward, blocking his path. We're trying to find the truth, Father. You can't keep me locked away forever. You don't understand, Sinar said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. If the seal is broken before you're ready, it will destroy you and everything around you. Jack stood, his fists clenched. Then help us. Don't just stand there. If you really care about her, you'll stop trying to control her and start protecting her the right way. Sinar hesitated, his gaze flickering between Jack and Ilara. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping. Very well. But know this, once the stabilizer is activated, there is no turning back. The path you've chosen is dangerous, and it will change everything. Jack knelt by the glyphs, his fingers moving swiftly to activate the sequence. The floor panel slid open, revealing a small device glowing with a faint blue light. The stabilizer, Jack said, holding it up. Ilara stared at it, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. But as she reached for the device, a sudden tremor shook the chamber, and a deep, ominous voice echoed through the walls. You are not ready, the voice rumbled, sending chills down their spines. Ilara's hand froze, her resolve wavering. She turned to Jack and Sinar, her voice trembling. What if this is a mistake? Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. If we don't try, you'll never know. Trust yourself, Ilara. You're stronger than you think." As the tremors subsided, Ilara took a deep breath, her fingers closing around the stabilizer. The glyphs on her iron pants flared brighter than ever, illuminating the chamber in a dazzling light. And with that, the seal began to break. The awakening. The room was still, save for the faint hum of energy coursing through the air. Ilara's hand trembled as she held the stabilizer in her palm. The device, small yet pulsing with power, felt both alien and familiar, like it belonged to her, but had been kept hidden for far too long. She could feel its weight, both physical and emotional. Around her, the walls of the chamber seemed to close in, as if reacting to the device's activation. The symbols on the iron pants began to glow more brightly, their soft pulse turning into an intense radiance that filled the room. Ilara gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. Jack stepped closer, his voice a quiet murmur. "Are you sure about this?" Ilara's eyes were fixed on the stabilizer, the light from the iron pants reflecting in her pupils. "I don't know if I'm sure about anything," she admitted, her voice wavering. "But I can't keep living like this. I have to know what's inside me, what I'm capable of." Lord Sinar, standing a few paces behind them, remained silent, his gaze intense but uncertain. The air between them was thick with unspoken fear, his past decisions now playing out before him in a way he hadn't imagined. He had always known that this day would come, the day when the iron pants would no longer contain his daughter's power. But now that it was happening, the weight of his responsibility and his fear for Ilara's safety hung heavy in the air. As Ilara steadied herself, she pressed the stabilizer against the iron, and an electric pulse shot through the room. The floor beneath them vibrated, and the temperature seemed to drop as the symbols on her pants began to shift, rearranging themselves in a strange sequence. The device hummed, almost in sync with the rhythm of Ilara's heartbeat, as if reacting to something deep inside her. A sudden, sharp pain shot through Ilara's body, making her gasp in shock. Her knees buckled, and she had to grab onto the nearest pillar to steady herself. She could feel something awakening within her, something ancient and powerful. It wasn't just physical, it was a sensation deep in her mind, as if something primal was clawing its way to the surface. "Something's wrong." Ilara cried out, her voice filled with panic. "I can't control it." Jack moved toward her, but before he could reach her, a burst of energy shot out from her body, slamming into the walls of the chamber. The lights flickered, and the stone pillars cracked under the force of the blast. Ilara's iron pants glowed brighter than ever, their surface now burning hot as the energy she was unleashing spiraled out of control. "No!" Sinar shouted, rushing forward to try and grab her, but the force field surrounding her power pushed him back. Ilara's eyes were wide with fear as she struggled to contain the energy now surging through her. She could feel her mind fracturing, torn between the human part of her and the alien power that was now waking up inside her. I can't stop it." Jack didn't hesitate. He pushed through the chaos, grabbing the stabilizer from her hand. "You have to trust me, Ilara," he shouted. "You're not alone in this." With all his strength, Jack pressed the stabilizer back into the glowing glyphs on the iron pants. As soon as the device made contact, the room went completely still. The air was thick with tension as the energy that had been spiraling out of control began to calm. Ilara's breathing was ragged, her body trembling as she tried to hold on to herself. A strange warmth spread through her, as if the stabilizer was soothing the storm raging within her. The power didn't disappear, it just quieted, like a wild animal that had been tamed, but only just. For a long moment, everything was silent. Ilara's breathing slowed as she looked at Jack, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. Did it work?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack nodded, his hand still trembling from the raw energy he had just witnessed. "For now. But this is only the beginning." Ilara touched her chest, feeling the heat of the iron pants slowly retreating as the energy settled. It was like she had been holding her breath for her entire life, and now, finally, she could exhale. But even though the immediate danger had passed, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside her, something irreversible. She looked up at her father, who had been watching the entire process in silent horror. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. But Ilara knew him well enough to see the conflict in his eyes. He had always feared what would happen when the iron pants finally unlocked, but he had never expected this. "Ilara," Thynar said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of caution and love. "You've done something no one could have foreseen. But now, the question remains, what comes next?" Ilara felt the power still humming within her, a constant presence. It was no longer a threat, but neither was it something she fully understood. She had unlocked something ancient, something that belonged to both humans and cryomaxians. But with it came a responsibility she hadn't yet grasped. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted, her voice shaking. "But I do know one thing. I can't go back. Not now. Not after this." Jack stood beside her, his eyes locked on hers. "We'll figure it out together," he said, his voice steady. Ilara nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. She was no longer the helpless girl bound by iron. She was something more, something unknown and dangerous, but also capable of shaping her own destiny. But just as she thought they might have a moment of peace, the faint sound of a ship's engines grew louder in the distance, cutting through the stillness. Tynar's face darkened. "They're here." Ilara looked at her father, feeling the weight of his words. She had been awakened, and now the galaxy would come for her. The price of freedom. The air outside the hidden chamber grew heavy with tension. The deep hum of the approaching ships vibrated in the ground beneath them. Ilara's pulse quickened, and her gaze darted to her father, Lord Sinar. She could see the growing concern etched on his face, despite his usual stoic demeanor. He had always controlled every situation, always been the one to determine the course of action. But now, it was different. She had broken free from his plans, and there was no turning back. Ilara glanced at Jack, who stood beside her, a look of determination on his face. His earlier confidence had shifted to a quiet resolve. The energy within her was still pulsing, buzzing under her skin, but now it was tempered. The stabilizer had worked, for the moment. Yet she knew it wasn't enough. Not by a long shot. "They'll come for you," Thynar said, his voice low, but unmistakably sharp with urgency. "The forces you've just unleashed, these are not local threats. The ancient records speak of a power that draws attention. Attention from across galaxies. There is no hiding from them." Ilara's heart sank as she thought of what was coming. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The Intergalactic Concord," Thynar answered, his eyes hardening. "A coalition of powerful worlds. Many who want your power for themselves. They have been watching us for centuries. Your mother knew this, which is why she helped create the Iron Seal in the first place. She believed that you were too powerful to be left unchecked." "But I'm not a weapon," Ilara said, her voice trembling. "I'm not some tool to be used. I'm human. I'm cryonaxian. I just want to know who I am." Jack stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You're right, and no one can use you. We'll make sure of that." Sinar's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, but then the sound of ships landing outside jolted them back to the present. His expression hardened. "We don't have much time. We need to move. Now." Without another word, Sinar turned and began to lead them through the labyrinth of corridors beneath the palace. The walls were cold and silent, the hum of energy still reverberating in Ilara's bones. The further they went, the deeper they descended into the heart of Cryonax's underworld, a series of hidden tunnels used for escape during past conflicts. As they moved, Ilara couldn't help but wonder if the choices she had made in the past few days would be the ones to define her future. Her father, her protector, now seemed like an obstacle, his fears and control no longer a shield but a prison. and yet she couldn't ignore the truth he had shared. There was danger ahead, dangers far beyond what she had ever imagined. They reached a small docking bay where a sleek, dark ship waited. Its design was unfamiliar, the hull made from materials that seemed to shift with the light. Sinar ushered them aboard quickly. "You're going to need to fly this," Kynar said, nodding to Jack, who was still standing close to Ilara. His tone was gruff, but there was an edge of trust in his words that surprised both Jack and Ilara. "Me?" Jack asked, incredulous. "You trust me with this?" Sinar didn't even blink. "I trust you more than I trust anyone else in this galaxy right now. You know how to navigate. You will need to get us off this planet before they arrive." As they boarded the ship, Jack took a seat at the controls. The ship's interface flickered to life under his touch, revealing a series of unfamiliar symbols and codes. He swallowed his nerves, focusing on the task at hand. "All right, I can do this. Just don't expect me to fly us straight through a black hole or anything." Ilara smiled weakly, the humor doing little to ease the tension in her chest. She knew they were running out of time. Sinar secured himself in a seat next to Ilara, his eyes never leaving the screens as Jack worked. "They will not hesitate to destroy us, Ilara," he warned quietly. "The Concord ships are equipped with the latest weapons. We may not survive this escape." Ilara felt the weight of his words pressing on her chest. She turned to Jack, who was staring at the flight controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. She could see that the power inside her was still flickering, a constant reminder of the danger she posed. If the Concorde found out what she was capable of, there would be no stopping them. "Jack, if we don't make it," Ilara began, but he cut her off with a determined look. "We'll make it," he said, voice steady. "We have to." The ship lurched into motion, lifting off the ground with a surprising smoothness. As they ascended through the atmosphere, Ilara looked out the window and saw the familiar blue-green world of Cryonax receding beneath them. For the first time in her life, she felt both liberated and utterly alone. "We're not safe yet," Kynar said, his voice cold and practical. "The Concorde is monitoring every intergalactic signal. They will track us, no matter where we go." Jack's hands flew over the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory as they entered the outer atmosphere. "We need to jump to another system, far from here. The further, the better." Ilara looked at Jack, then at Sinar. The reality of their situation hit her like a wave. She wasn't just running from her father's fears anymore. She wasn't just running from the alien forces that wanted to use her. She was running from the truth about who she was and what she could become. "Where are we going?" Ilara asked quietly. "I'm going to take us to the outer rim," Jack said, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "Where the Concorde has less control. But we're still going to be hunted. They won't stop until they find you." Ilara nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. "Then we fight." For the first time since her powers had awakened, Ilara felt a surge of something deeper than fear, anger, determination, and the undeniable feeling that she was ready to face whatever came next. The ship continued its steady ascent, and Ilara's heart beat in sync with the hum of the engines. There was no going back now. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and betrayal. But one thing was certain: she would not be controlled. As the stars outside the ship began to blur, Ilara sat back in her seat, her mind racing with the weight of the coming storm. She wasn't just escaping from her father's grip. She was escaping the chains of her own past, the fear of what she might become, and the power that still pulsed within her. She wasn't just running away. She was preparing for war. The weapon within. The stars outside the ship stretched into streaks as they accelerated past the outer rim of the galaxy. Ilara stared out the window, her thoughts as turbulent as the dark void they were now speeding through. The hum of the engines was constant, but in her mind, the silence was deafening. The weight of her new reality pressed heavily on her chest. She wasn't just the daughter of Lord Sinar anymore. She wasn't just a prisoner bound by iron pants. She was something else, something powerful, something dangerous. Beside her, Jack sat at the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had already recalibrated their course several times, trying to throw off any potential trackers the Concorde may have left behind. But the further they traveled, the more the reality set in. They were on the run, and no place would be safe. Behind them, Sinar remained unusually quiet. He sat in the back of the ship, eyes closed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as if in deep thought. His usual authoritative presence was gone. Now there was only a sense of regret, a heaviness that seemed to weigh him down more than the situation ever could. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Sinar broke the silence. "You don't fully understand what you've done, Elara. The stabilizer was a temporary fix, but the consequences of removing the seal..." His voice trailed off, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of fear and concern. "The power within you isn't something we can control. Not yet, and perhaps not ever." Elara didn't look at him. She kept her gaze fixed on the stars, her fingers tracing the smooth surface of her iron pants, which still held the faint glow of the glyphs despite their temporary stabilization. "I don't want to be controlled," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I spent my whole life under your control, and I'm done with that." Sinar's face twisted in frustration, but he held his tongue. Jack, sensing the tension rising between father and daughter, looked at Elara, then at Sinar. "What exactly are we running from, Sinar?" he asked, his voice cutting through the tension. "You keep talking about this power inside Elara, but you haven't told us what it actually is." Sinar's eyes darkened. "You want to understand? Fine, but you may not like the answer." Elara turned to face him, her heart pounding. Tell me what's inside me." Sinar took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between the two of them. "You are the product of a forbidden experiment. Your mother was part of a covert project designed to combine the best traits of both humans and cryomaxians. It was supposed to be a weapon, a hybrid being that could wield both human intellect and cryomaxian power. You were the key to turning the tide in a war that never came. But your mother, she didn't see you as a weapon. She saw you as a child, as someone who could live freely. She didn't want to create a monster." Elara's mind raced, her breath quickening. "So, I was never meant to exist for my own sake. I was made to be a weapon." "Not just a weapon," Sinar replied. "A weapon capable of destroying everything. The hybrid power inside you, it can reshape worlds, bend the laws of physics. You can manipulate energy itself, control matter, but in doing so, you risk collapsing the very fabric of reality. It's a force beyond anything we've ever encountered." Elara recoiled from the words. "That's why you locked me away. You were afraid of me." Sinar nodded slowly, his expression heavy with guilt. "Yes, I couldn't bear the thought of you unleashing that power. The galaxy isn't ready for what you could become. And now, you've begun to awaken it. That's why the Concorde will come for you. They'll want to harness your abilities, control you, use you as their weapon." "I don't want to be anyone's weapon," Elara whispered, her eyes filled with quiet rage. "I won't be." Jack watched the conversation unfold, his mind trying to process everything. He had known Elara was special. He had known she was different, but he hadn't realized the depth of it. She was more than just the key to her own freedom. She was the key to something far more dangerous. But Jack also knew one thing for sure: he couldn't abandon her now. "We need to find a way to stop this," Jack said, his voice firm. "We can't keep running forever. The Concorde won't just let us go. We need to figure out how to control her power, or at least contain it." Sinar shook his head. "It's not something that can be contained. Once the seal is broken, it's only a matter of time before the power consumes her. I thought the stabilizer would be enough, but it's just a temporary measure. We need a solution, and we need it fast." Elara stood, her face set in a mask of determination. Then I'll find my own solution." Jack turned toward her, his brow furrowed in concern. "Elara, wait. You don't even know what you're up against." "I've lived my whole life locked away, Jack," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I spent so many years afraid of what I might become, but I can't keep running from it. I need to learn how to control this power. I can't trust anyone else to do it for me." Sinar's voice grew quiet, his eyes filled with a sorrowful understanding. "You're right. No one else can. But you must be careful, Elara. The more you try to control it, the more dangerous it becomes. The power inside you isn't just your heritage. It's your destiny. But it comes with a price. I'm ready to pay it," Elara said, her voice steady, though the doubt was still there. She wasn't ready for this. She didn't know how to control the power surging within her, but she had to try. Jack stood up from his seat, moving toward her. "Then we're in this together. Whatever happens, we face it together." Elara looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and determination. "Thank you," she whispered. The ship hummed steadily as they continued to accelerate, but Elara couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. She could feel the power inside her, raw, untamed, and waiting for release. She had unlocked it, and now it was her responsibility to control it. But the more she learned about herself, the more terrifying it became. Could she truly control the weapon within, or would it control her? And as they sailed through the vast emptiness of space, Elara knew that the hardest part of her journey was only just beginning. A new dawn. The stars outside the ship had become a blur of light and darkness, the infinite vastness of space stretching out before them like an endless sea. The ship hummed quietly, its engine now a comforting sound in the background, but inside, the tension was palpable. Elara sat by the viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars, her mind racing with the magnitude of everything that had happened. She was no longer the girl locked in iron pants, no longer bound by the secrets her father had kept from her. But that didn't mean she was free. Not yet. Jack sat beside her, his eyes scanning the star charts. There was no sign of pursuit for now, but that didn't bring her much comfort. The truth was, Elara knew the Concord wouldn't give up so easily. They would come for her. She could feel it in the air, a heavy presence, waiting just beyond the horizon. "We need to find a place to hide," Jack said, his voice cutting through the stillness. He didn't look at her, but spoke with a quiet urgency. "A place where the Concord can't track us, at least for a while." Elara nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't want to hide anymore. We can't keep running forever." She turned her gaze to him. "There's a reason they're coming for me, Jack. It's not just my power. It's the knowledge they think I possess, the key to something ancient. They think I'm a weapon, and they're right." Jack furrowed his brow. "You're not a weapon, Elara. You're more than that." Her eyes darkened, her hands tightening into fists. "That's what I've been told my whole life. But I've seen it, felt it, the power inside me, the chaos I can unleash. They were right to fear me." She stood, moving toward the center of the ship, her footsteps echoing softly against the floor. The ship was small, quiet, just the three of them now, hurtling through the void. Sinar had retreated into his quarters after their last conversation, his earlier anxiety and guilt now replaced by a cold, distant silence. Elara understood his withdrawal. She had broken his trust, and now she couldn't shake the sense that he was watching her, waiting for her to make the inevitable mistake. But Elara couldn't afford to wait anymore. She had been locked away for far too long, her life dictated by the choices of others. She wasn't going to let them control her any longer, not even her father. Jack followed her, his footsteps hesitant, but he didn't speak. He was waiting for her to figure it out. She was the one with the power, the one with the responsibility. He could guide her, protect her, but it was her choice now. "I know you're afraid," he said finally, his voice quiet, but firm. "I can see it in your eyes. You're afraid of what you might become, But running from it won't make it go away. You have to face it, Elara. You have to face yourself. Elara turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that almost startled her. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. The power inside me, the thing they created, it's not just a part of me. It is me. I can feel it, Jack. It's like a storm inside, raging, waiting for a reason to break free. And if I don't control it, if I don't understand it, you will, Jack interrupted, stepping closer. You're stronger than you think. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. Elara shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. How can you say that? You don't even know what's inside me. You don't know the darkness I'm capable of. I don't care, Jack said simply. You're more than the power inside you. You're you. And I'll help you find a way to control it. But you have to trust yourself. Trust that you can make the right choice. His words settled into her heart, a small flicker of hope igniting. She had spent so long trying to suppress the power, afraid of what it might do to her, to everyone around her. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the power that was the problem. Maybe it was how she used it. Maybe it was the choices she made from here on out. With a deep breath, Elara turned away from Jack and headed to the ship's control panel. She didn't know where they could go, where they could find sanctuary. But she knew one thing. If she was going to survive, if she was going to control the power inside her, she needed to face the truth. And she couldn't do it in hiding anymore. We can't keep running, Elara said, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. We need to find the people who know about the power inside me. The people who created this. They're the ones who can help me understand it. Jack raised an eyebrow. You mean the people who made you a weapon? Elara nodded. Yes, but they're also the ones who might have answers. The ancients. They'd been watching me for centuries. They've known what I was all along. It's time I confront them. Sinar's voice came from behind them, his tone weary but resigned. You're not ready to face them, Elara. You've just unlocked a power you don't yet understand. These people, they won't treat you like you think they will. They'll use you, manipulate you, and if you're not careful, you'll lose yourself completely. Elara turned slowly, meeting her father's eyes. For the first time, she saw not just the ruler of Cryonax, but a father who had tried, perhaps too hard, to protect her. He had locked her away because he thought it was the only way to keep her safe. But now she understood. He didn't trust her to make her own choices. He never had. I have to make my own decisions now, Elara said, her voice firm. I can't keep living under your control. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not your weapon. I'm not anyone's weapon. And I'll face the ancients, whether you're with me or not. Sinar didn't answer immediately. He only looked at her with a mixture of sadness and pride, as if seeing her for the first time. Then you're no longer my daughter, he said softly. But I will help you, if you'll let me. We can't face them alone. Elara's heart twisted. This wasn't the reunion she had hoped for, but it was the one she needed. She had made her choice. Now, it was time to step into the unknown. With Jack by her side and her father reluctantly joining them, Elara knew that her journey had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and the truth about who she was, what she could become, and what lay ahead was still a mystery. But for the first time in her life, she was free, not from the chains of the Iron Pants, but from the fear that had held her back for so long. As the ship veered toward the dark, unexplored sectors of space, Elara looked out at the stars, a sense of calm settling over her. She wasn't running anymore. She was forging her own path, her own destiny. And with every light that flickered in the distance, she knew she was no longer bound by the past. She was ready to face whatever came next.